Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Dora.
My name is Jessa DeLeon.
My name is Nisha Tavasoli.
Melissa Widener.
My name is Sarah. I'm a senior at UCSB.
My name is Evan.
Gabriel Lazo.
And my name is Natalie.
Zach Zimmerman.
Hi, my name is Penise.
Hi, I'm Courtney.
My name is Bella.
Hi, I'm Kayla.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and I'm a UCSB student.
I am a senior at UCSB.
I am part of KCSB Sports, and UCEAP.
I'm part of the Daily Nexus and also Alpha Kappa Psi, which is a co-ed business fraternity here on campus.
And I'm a member of Theta here at UCSB.
I am a communications and Spanish double major.
And I am a philosophy major.
Psychology and communications double major.
I'm an intern at the Education Abroad office.
One of the editors for the Daily Nexus.
I'm a member of the Delta Gamma sorority.
I am also a rower.
And I'm the oldest of 9 kids, 4 of which attend UCs.
My name is Dan Linz. I have had the honor of teaching this course entitled Communicating Consent. And in this course, we've attempted to understand what is consent. And I can tell you at the end of it, I've learned so much from the students, but I couldn't tell you what consent is.
I was sexually assaulted using drugs and alcohol when I was underage.
And he took advantage of me.
The first assault was from someone who I didn't know, and that had less of effect than the second assault.
My definition of sexual consent is active, continuous agreement between two parties during any kind of sexual encounter.
Honestly, I don't think that I have a holistic definition of sexual consent that would be all-encompassing. I think it's much too complicated of a subject to narrow down into one single definition.
Jumping into a therapy session with CAPS, which I love.
I found my current group of teammates and best friends, and those are the people who I talk about everything with now.
% of attempted and completed rapes of women in college were reported to law enforcement officers.
There's a problem how we define rape. There's no one way it happens. There was this one time my friend came back from hooking up with this guy that she had been seeing for a while, and she was really confused and uncomfortable. When she told me what had happened, in my head I was like, oh my God, that was rape. She didn't report it. She was really confused about the situation, and she had told him no, but he kept pushing her to have sex. And even though she wasn't aggressively resisting him, she continuously told him that she didn't want to have sex with him, and he still forced her to have sex. She thought that because she knew him and she'd had sex with him before, that if she had told everyone that he had raped her, that it wouldn't have held up.
I'm actually a survivor of 2 sexual assaults. The first assault was from someone who I didn't know, and that had less of effect than the second assault. The second assault was from a friend of mine, and we were at a party drinking, and I ended up passing out on couch trying to sleep off some of the alcohol, and that's when he decided to assault me.
A lot of the information that we get about sex is early on in media, and it's usually portrayed inaccurately, and most perpetrators are actual well-known acquaintances.
But college acquaintance rape victims actually face additional consequences. Many drop out of school because if they stay, they might regularly face their attackers in class, in their dorms, or at campus events.
The idea you have of a typical perpetrator from shows and movies is not what it is like in real life. The schema that they're going to be some creepy guy with glasses with a hood on his head is just not true.
The difference between the first assault and the second assault is the second assault was extremely violent. And I believe that with knowing him and being close friends with him and then it being so violent, it really threw me into a tailspin of depression and uncertainty and not really understanding what happened. And then the process of talking to police from the first assault versus the second one was very interesting as well. The first assault, the police it was when I was deployed to Iraq, so they were just asking, you know, where was I, what exactly happened, and left it at that. When I was stateside, the police were asking me what was I wearing, how much did I drink, was I flirting with him, and then they asked people that were at the party those same questions. That in turn, with the police asking me those questions, really made me feel that the actions that he took against me was my fault.
So what is sexual consent? If you were to ask someone, whether it's your friend or a stranger in passing, their answers will probably vary.
To me, sexual consent is respect for both parties.
It is so multifaceted, so complicated.
My definition of sexual consent is when both people who are having sex are in congruence that they want to have sex with each other.
My definition of consent is simple. It's agreement between two individuals who both want to engage in sex continuously. It's simple and it's sexy.
My definition of sexual consent does not involve force, hesitation, or silence. It involves an ongoing communication by both partners, and it includes a yes or whatever chemistry works between that unique relationship.
And I don't really have a definition for sexual consent. I think it's a really variable thing and it can be defined in a lot of ways.
To me personally, sexual consent is two individuals agreeing on the behaviors and matters, specifically sexual behaviors within their given environment.
The definition of sexual consent is when two people are consenting to a sexual encounter. That means that it needs to be both nonverbal cues and verbal cues that are consent.
My definition of sexual consent is when people want to have sex with each other.
In my opinion, sexual consent is when both parties enthusiastically and excitedly are committing to the sexual acts that they're engaging in. If one party seems a little bit more into it than the other, I think that there definitely has to be some communication between them to see that both of them are on the same page.
To me, consent is knowing that whatever you're doing with the other person, either through explicit or implicit communication between the two of you, that you're both okay with what's going on.
So what's sexual consent? Easy. It's the best sex you'll ever have.
And I think it's important for people to be comfortable with themselves and to be assertive and to be comfortable with saying no and yes at the same time. Because I think it's important for people to know their boundaries and know what they want and don't want with themselves and their partners as well.
I think that talking about sex with people, especially with our friends and our peers and people that we're really close and comfortable with, people that we trust, is really important as far as creating a sex positive environment and a place where people feel like sex is destigmatized and where they're free to feel comfortable and confident in themselves and what they like and what they don't like, especially in regards to sex. And I say that because I actually had a personal experience with that sort of thing when I was a freshman. I had not had sex before coming to UCSB, so I was a virgin still. And I remember I was out one night with some friends and we were at a house with guys that we didn't know, and I found myself upstairs with a guy who was drunk, and he took advantage of me. And I remember I told him no a bunch of times. Sorry. Sorry, I'm gonna take. And he was kind of like insistent on performing sexual acts on me. And at the time, like I said, I was a virgin, so I didn't really know what I was doing or like what I could do, in the sense that I didn't really understand that like when I was uncomfortable, that was totally fine and that was totally warranted, and I had the right to say no and have someone respect the fact that I said no. But I felt weird. I knew that it was like wrong and it wasn't good that I felt that way, but at the time I didn't really have people to like talk about that with, or hash those feelings out the morning after, even the night of. So I kept that to myself and I kept that bottled up, and I thought that that was like a normal experience. I did not know how to feel about it, and that as like your first sexual encounter is really horrible. I wouldn't really wish that upon anyone. And so that's what I compartmentalized for a long time, until I found my current group of teammates and best friends, and those are the people who I talk about everything with now. And I find that we talk about everything together, especially sex, all the time, and it's something that can kind of be a little bit like uncomfortable for some people. If you don't know anyone very well and you just start talking about sex, that's kind of weird, I guess. But if you have your close friends and your peers and you talk about that a lot, it's not inappropriate, I don't think. I think it's really important to talk about that with them, because it destigmatizes sex and it makes it okay to like uncover things that you might have felt weird about or uncomfortable about. And I think had I had that environment before where I had friends who I was really trusting of and people who I could talk to about what had happened to me, I think I would have understood better. This isn't something that like I had to feel uncomfortable with about myself, at least. Like this isn't something that I had to carry around with me by myself and think, did I do something wrong? Or like, you know, was I supposed to do this? Was I supposed to do that? Because I shouldn't have had to go through that.
Before I was assaulted, consent really didn't mean much to me. I really left it in the man's hands, basically, and allowed him to kind of do or initiate what he wanted. Usually there wasn't any asking if you want to have sex with me. It just kind of went in stages of flirting, touching, kissing, and then, you know, the actual act. After I was assaulted, it was very different. I felt that there definitely needs to be consent established before any action is taken. And I believe it was just because that decision was taken away from me, and I didn't realize how important consent actually was. So now it's very much, I would like to have sex with you, and that must be reciprocated and that person say the same thing with asking, may I, or something of that nature.
No means no and yes mean yes makes things sound simple. They're not.
As I reflect on the education that I've received as a UCSB student regarding sexual consent, I was exposed to campaigns such as yes means yes and no means no. While I do think that these campaigns are on the right track, I think that they fail to acknowledge the importance of nonverbal communication in sexual assault cases.
Consent is too contextual and complex to be fully summarized in any short phrase like yes means yes or no means no. It's too nuanced and subtle, and it relies on the individual body expressions and the ability to read those expressions of people in any given situation.
I think in real life situations regarding sexual assault, there's much more to it than just a verbal exchange of consent, and that should be taken into consideration.
I think that, well, from a legal perspective, it's probably useful to have clear and well-defined meanings of what sexual consent is. It looks different in any given scenario, and it should be taught in such a way.
In our culture, there's an important shift occurring. We're now seeing people moving towards affirmative consent and recognizing its importance in every sexual encounter. In fact, a UCSB alumni, Hannah Beth Jackson, was in charge of a California State Senate bill.
Good morning. I'm Senator Hannah Beth Jackson. I am the Vice Chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus and a joint author with Senator Kevin De Leon of this legislation. For far too long, there's been a trivializing attitude about rape that ignores the victim and protects the perpetrator. It seems sexual assault is treated as an inevitable part of the college experience, and instead of fighting to change it, schools simply overlook it.
Bill SB 967 was actually signed by Governor Jerry Brown in 2014, codifying affirmative consent.
We are going to change that thinking of inaction. We are going to make a strong statement through this legislation that California is moving from a culture of acceptance to a culture of no excuses. No excuses for rape, no excuses for blaming the victim, no excuses for not supporting the victims, and no excuses for colleges and universities turning a blind eye to this kind of sexual behavior.
This shift to a more inclusive and understanding point of view of consent from the no means no phrases to yes means yes is incredibly important. However, I still don't think that it's something that could be entirely codified. It's so unique within each situation to define it one single way, while it is important for legal reasons, is also impractical.
In college, it's pretty common for people to have friends with benefits kinds of relationships, but it's really important to be honest and open with the other person about what you want. Either person needs to feel comfortable and confident that they can stop doing whatever it is or slow down whatever's going on at any time and know that the other person is going to respect that wish. Nobody owes each other anything, and people need to be comfortable with one another.
Unfortunately, Gaucho FYI does not talk about the friend with benefits relationship, and that's very prevalent in Isla Vista. Although this can be fun and casual, it's important to remember that the benefits portion of this relationship does not need to be maintained. Past consent does not entail future consent. It can be revoked at any time.
We're always hearing about how you can't consent to sex when you're drunk. But what happens when both parties are drunk and they have drunk sex? What does that mean for both of you? How do you have those conversations? That's something that I wanted to know as a freshman, and I still don't totally know today.
When alcohol is involved, things get even more complicated. And that's a huge issue on our campus.
Consent can't be easily defined in one sentence. Let's be real, there's a lot of people on this campus that are having drunk sex. We should be learning how to have those conversations after it happens.
At UCSB, kids get drunk. They go out, they do stuff that they probably shouldn't do, and then regret it the next morning. This is a huge issue.
69% of cases reported to the Santa Barbara Rape Crisis Center involve alcohol.
Because of my involvement in Greek life here, I've been exposed to the party culture for 4 years, and I think that the amount of drinking and partying that we have has created an environment of really casual sexual experiences, and it's been normalized to say things like I blacked out and woke up in a random person's bed, and that creates blurred lines of what's right and what's wrong and what's rape and what isn't rape.
Being a member of a sorority, we're deemed high risk for sexual assault. Therefore, we're given additional education at least once a year. But sexual assault can happen to anyone, so we should all be getting the same education.
Gaucho FYI doesn't even mention sexual harassment, yet half of college students say they've experienced it. If you're walking down the street and someone hollers at you, that is sexual harassment and it should be treated as such. By allowing these sorts of microaggressions to happen, we're perpetuating the rape culture that leads to sexual assaults.
It's really common in the Isla Vista party culture for friends to get drunk and go to parties, but that means there's not a designated sober person to intervene if something goes wrong.
Freshmen are at a high risk for sexual assault given that they're going out with a lot of people who they've just met in an unfamiliar place. And although there's a decrease in sexual assault between your freshman year and your senior year, there is also an increase between your third and fourth year. This is showing that we need ongoing sexual assault education throughout our college careers.
It's not always safe to be alone in Isla Vista. Although CSOs are helpful in making you feel like you're safe, in reality, you may not actually be safe if they don't show up on time or come at all. CSO shifts run until 5 a.m., and after that, you're pretty much on your own. In reality, a CSO cannot prevent a rape from occurring.